Disclaimer: this program contains graphic descriptions of real crimes. Viewer discretion is advised. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in court. Whitfield, 1 stoplight and 1,000 opinions. The Carpenter house sits on a low rise at the edge of town. Paint the color of old bone wind chimes that sing even when there's no wind. When Mark Carpenter married Elise Grady 2 summers ago, people said it looked good on him. Like sleep finally found his pillow after a decade of chasing it. Inside, his twin sons, Jonah and Nathan, both 19, shared everything most brothers don't: a room, a truck, a shorthand that turned full sentences into a nod. Jonah, steady hands, grease under the nails, a camera slung to his ribs like a spare lung. Nathan, the spark, fast with a joke, faster with a dare, certain that speed could outrun any consequence. Elise arrived with lavender in the laundry and music in the kitchen. She didn't replace their mother, she replaced the silence. She learned their coffee orders, taped their wrestling schedules to the fridge, and folded their jackets with the care of someone trying to earn a last name. At church, she sang low harmony and slipped mints to fidgeting kids. At the hardware store, she kissed Mark's cheek at noon like it was a ritual that kept lights on. From the outside, the house looked healed, but houses are like people. They memorize the footsteps, the pauses, the secrets that stop just short of knocking. And this house had started listening. The twins' differences were small at first. Jonah took pictures no one posed for the tender, unguarded frames between moments, and sometimes Elise stood beside him at the porch rail to see the world the way he saw it. "You have an eye," she said once, sunlight pooling in her voice. Nathan watched from the yard, half smile, half question, waiting for the punchline that never came. The summer cookout should have been ordinary: charred corn, citronella candles, the old F-150 parked like a faithful dog. Nathan mixed drinks he didn't plan to finish. Jonah moved through the crowd collecting small truths with his lens. Elise, in a honey-colored sundress, slid her chair an inch closer to the boy showing her photos. It was nothing, it was everything. That night, after the dishes were stacked and Mark was on the phone laughing with a supplier, Elise wandered onto the porch. Jonah was there, framing the streetlights with his hands. "You make things look brighter than they were," he said without turning. Elise answered too softly, "Maybe they were always bright. Maybe we forgot to look." A breeze nudged the wind chimes. Nathan heard them from the driveway and looked up in time to see 2 silhouettes lean toward the same horizon. He didn't have proof, only a temperature change, but a twin knows when the room has been rewired. Whitfield didn't notice, not yet. The town noticed sales at Mark's store and the new runner Elise laid down the hall. They noticed the twins' birthday cake at the diner, 2 candles, 1 wish. They didn't notice Jonah timing his steps so he wouldn't cross paths with Nathan on the stairs. They didn't notice Elise pausing outside the boy's door at 11:47, twice in 1 week, reaching for a knock she didn't allow herself to make. If love is a promise, this house was trying to keep it. Fresh flowers on the table, clean towels, Sunday pot roast, but promises fray where need rubs against loneliness, and loneliness lives even in crowded rooms. One wet Tuesday, a dimmer switch at the dance studio wouldn't behave. Jonah stayed late to fix it. Elise hovered, handing him the right screwdriver like she'd practiced the choreography. The lights came up warm and even, and she spun once in the center of the floor, the studio forgetting its scuffs. Jonah lifted the camera out of instinct. Click, a woman mid. Turn, the kind of smile that looks like mercy. They both felt it. The tilt, not a cliff, a slope. They didn't say the word wrong. They said thank you, good work, get home safe. But the house heard the truth in the tremor between syllables, and houses, like people, keep score even when they don't want to. By autumn, small things had become signs. Elise poured wine she didn't drink. Nathan swallowed jokes before they left his mouth. Jonah started printing photos and tacking them above his desk, a thimble on a sill, the river holding its breath at the bend, Elise's hand, only her hand, adjusting a curtain, light webbed between her fingers. Mark, the only piece not yet shifted, told anyone who'd listen that he hadn't felt this settled since '09. My boys, he'd say, pride simple and clean, always together. He meant it as a blessing. In a different story it would have been. But in this one, together was becoming a question, not an answer. And on a night the power would flicker, and the candles would come out. That question would demand a blood, price no one meant to pay. If you ask Cher if Pike, when the story began to tilt, she'll tell you it was the summer cookout 6 months before Jonah's death. Nothing about that night looked like tragedy. It looked like a family at ease. Citronella candles, charred corn, Mark grinning with a beer in his hand, and the twins trading jokes over the grill. But the house remembers things people don't. Elise wore a sundress the color of honey. She set her chair beside Jonah, leaning close to see the pictures on his camera. "You have an eye," she told him, the words so soft Nathan nearly missed them. "You see the part people don't pose." Jonah smiled, quiet, almost shy. For once, someone noticed what he noticed. Nathan laughed at first, waiting for his brother to share the moment like they always had. But Jonah didn't look his way, and Elise didn't either. Later that night, while Mark stacked plates inside, Elise found Jonah on the porch. He was framing the streetlight through oak leaves with his hands. "You make things look brighter than they were," he said. Elise's reply was almost a whisper. "Maybe they were always bright. Maybe we just forgot to look. That was all it took. No kiss, no touch. Just two people holding the same silence too long." Nathan saw them through the screen door. He couldn't explain it. There was no proof, no crime, just a temperature change. But twins don't need proof. They can feel when the air has been stolen. From there the triangle began to sharpen. Elise found herself split between the brothers, Jonah's stillness, Nathan's fire. Each one reflected a different piece of her, each one a mirror she didn't know how to stop looking into. She told herself it was harmless, just kindness, just conversation. But kindness can be the most dangerous disguise. By autumn, Jonah was sneaking away to the dance studio under the excuse of fixing lights. Elise lingered beside him, passing tools like they were secrets. Nathan kept his distance, but his eyes were flint every time he caught them laughing in a corner. The house felt it, the footsteps too careful on the stairs, the late night pauses outside closed doors. A triangle isn't just three sides, it's a knife, waiting for someone to fall on it, and in Whitfield, knives always found their mark. Autumn came heavy in Whitfield, draping everything in damp leaves and quiet evening. To the rest of the town, the Carpenters were steady. Mark busy at the hardware store, Nathan running cars out to the quarry, Jonah slipping behind the lens of his camera. Elise hummed in the kitchen, lavender in the laundry, choir on Sundays. But inside the house something fragile had already shifted. The air was charged, like the split second before lightning touches ground. One Tuesday night, a dimmer switch at the dance studio refused to behave. Jonah offered to fix it. Elise stayed late, hovering as he crouched by the wall, tools spread like puzzle pieces. He was focused, jaw tight, grease still under his fingernails from the shop. Elise passed him the screwdriver, fingers brushing his in a moment that was too ordinary to explain, and too loaded to ignore. The lights flicked back on, warm and even. Elise stepped into the center of the studio, spun once, her sundress catching the glow. For an instant, the scuffed wooden floor looked like a stage. Jonah's camera was in his hands before he could think. Click, she froze mid-turn, their eyes locked, hers startled, his unguarded. A silence stretched, thick enough to trap them both. "You make things look brighter than they were," Jonah whispered, the words trembling out of him. Or maybe Elise's voice broke, maybe no one ever saw them right, and before either could stop it, she leaned in. He met her halfway. The kiss was startled, guilty, over before it began, but it was enough to tear down every boundary, enough to plant a seed that could only grow into ruin. They both pulled back instantly, breathless. Elise shook her head. "This can't be. I know." Jonah's voice cracked with shame, but his eyes held her like she was light he'd been chasing in the dark. They parted without another word, but the air clung to them, heavy with what they'd done. When Elise walked home later, she paused outside the twins' room at 11:47 again, hand raised, trembling, before pulling it back. She never knocked. She never had to. The house had already heard the truth. And the house keeps everything. Furniture doesn't move by itself, but it can learn to watch. And in the Carpenter house, the walls were already whispering. Elise and Jonah tried to bury what had happened at the studio. No more lingering touches, no more conversations that strayed past safe ground. But guilt leaves fingerprints, and the house caught them everywhere. Elise poured wine she didn't drink. Jonah slipped out after dinner with excuses that grew thinner each night. He saw the way Elise looked away too quickly when Jonah entered a room. He saw Jonah fumble his words when Elise brushed past him in the hallway. Small things, harmless things, unless you were a twin. Twins don't need proof. They feel the fracture before it shows. One Friday, Nathan caught a text on Jonah's phone glowing in the dark of their shared room. "The studio is quiet if you need space. No name." No signature, but Nathan knew whose voice lived in those words. He waited until Jonah left that night, then followed. He parked a block from the studio, headlights off, breath fogging in the cold. Through the rain, smeared windshield, he saw it, Elise unlocking the back door. Jonah stepping inside, two shadows swallowed by the dark. They didn't kiss, not that Nathan saw, but when they came out an hour later, the air between them wasn't innocent. It was heavy, fragile, like they were carrying something neither of them dared set down. Nathan gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles burned. He had no photograph, no recording. What he had was worse, certainty. That night, he stared at himself in the bathroom mirror, studying the face he shared with his brother. His reflection looked back, unchanged, but Nathan felt like half of him had been stolen, and the thief was someone who'd sworn to love them both. The feud hadn't broken open yet, but the house could already smell the blood. Secrets don't stay quiet in Whitfield. They hum, they rattle, they rouse the walls. By the time November winds clawed at the siding, Nathan couldn't hold it any more. He cornered Jonah where they'd spent half their lives, the garage. Tools still lined neatly from the F-150 rebuild, the smell of oil and metal like childhood memories wrapped in grease. Nathan leaned on the workbench, jaw tight. "Tell me it's not true." Jonah froze mid-sentence, rag still in his hands. "What? You and Elise?" Nathan's voice cracked like wood under pressure. "Tell me it's not true." Silence, the kind that hurts worse than an answer. Jonah looked down at his hands, at the black lines under his nails, and in that pause Nathan had all the proof he needed. His laugh came out sharp, bitter. "She's our stepmother, Joe. I know." Jonah's voice was small, strangled by shame. "Do you love her?" Nathan's question wasn't just about Elise. It was about them. The bond that had been there since the womb, the tether that made them halves of the same whole. "Do you love her more than you love me?" Jonah's eyes flashed, desperate. "No, not like that. I don't know what this is." Nathan shoved off the workbench, pacing. "I'll tell you what it is. It's wrong. It's breaking us apart." Jonah stepped forward, pleading. "Please, Nate, let me end it. I'll stop, I swear." But Nathan wasn't listening anymore. His voice dropped, low and lethal. "I'm telling Dad." Panic flickered in Jonah's eyes. "Don't, please, not like this. You'll destroy him." Nathan's hands curled into fists at his sides. He could have swung. Years of wrestling taught them both how. But he didn't, because twins have their own rules. They don't draw blood unless it's to stop a lie. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "You already ended it, Joe. You just don't see it yet." Jonah's mouth opened, closed, like he was drowning without water. That night, Nathan didn't tell Mark. He told Elise, and when he did, the feud no longer lived in shadows. It had a pulse, a direction, a deadline. The house felt it coming. Thanksgiving in the Carpenter house was tradition. Mark sharpened his father's old carving knife, humming the same tune he always did. Jonah mashed the potatoes, careful and steady. Nathan lined the table with plates. Elise lit the candles and whispered a prayer, her voice soft but taut, like a violin string pulled too tight. From the outside, it looked like any other holiday meal. Turkey steaming, cranberry sauce gleaming in cut glass bowls. But under the surface, the house was holding its breath. They made it through the turkey, through the rolls, through Elise's green bean casserole. The air was heavy, but no one had spoken a word that could break it. It should have been dessert that saved them. Instead, it was dessert that shattered everything. Mark, smiling, pulled out a stack of old photos. He passed one around, the twins, 10 years old, asleep on the couch with their heads touching. A dog sprawled across their legs. His voice warmed. "Look at that. My boys, always together." Jonah smiled faintly, eyes tracing the picture. Elise smiled too long, too wistful. Her gaze lingered, soft and aching, on Jonah's face in the photo. Jonah noticed, his lips parting with something he didn't mean to show. Nathan saw it. The scrape of his fork against the plate was louder than thunder. Everyone froze. Nathan's jaw clenched, his hands trembling as he pushed his chair back. "You said it would stop." He hissed at Elise, low but sharp enough to cut. Mark blinked, confused. "What's going on?" Elise's face blanched. "Nathan, don't!" Nathan snapped, rising to his feet. His eyes burned into Jonah now. "And you swore." Jonah swallowed hard, shame thick in his throat. Nathan, it's not." But Nathan wasn't listening. His voice shook with fury and betrayal. "You think I don't see it. The way you look at her. The way she looks at you." Elise's hands trembled, her lips forming silent denials that sounded more like prayers. Mark stared between them, the carving knife still in his hand, his world tilting without warning. The candles flickered, the turkey cooled, and the family that once sat together at Thanksgiving now sat around a table set for war. The house knew then what the town would only learn later. This dinner wasn't just broken, it was cursed. There are nights that mark a before and an after. For the Carpenters, it came just a week after that fractured Thanksgiving, on a cold, wind-chilled evening when the power lines trembled and the lights flickered across Whitfield. Dinner was simple: chicken soup, bread rolls, the kind of meal meant to comfort. Mark fell asleep in his recliner afterward, a blanket pulled over his knees, the television buzzing with static as the storm rattled the windows. Jonah set fresh logs in the fireplace. Elise cleared the bowls, her hands too careful, too precise. Nathan poured himself a glass of wine, his movements sharp, deliberate. The room was small, but the silence between them was cavernous. "Anyone want?" Nathan asked, lifting the bottle. "No," Jonah said quickly, too quickly. "It should have been nothing. It was everything." Nathan slammed the bottle on the table. His eyes snapped to Elise, then to Jonah. "You think I don't see it. You think I'm blind." Elise's breath caught. "Nathan, please, don't," he roared. "Don't say my name like it belongs to you." Jonah rose to his feet. Don't talk to her like that." And Nathan's laugh was bitter, jagged. "Like what? Like she isn't our stepmother, like she didn't choose you." Jonah shook his head, panic in his eyes. "I never—" "Yes, you did." Nathan cut him off, his voice breaking. "The second you let her look at you that way, you stopped being my brother." The storm outside howled. Inside, the house braced. Nathan's hand shot to the heavy candlestick on the table. He lifted it, not to strike, but to make space, to push his brother back. Jonah lunged forward, grabbing for it. Elise cried out, rushing between them. In the struggle, the candlestick slipped. Jonah's foot caught the edge of the rug. His head struck the stone hearth with a crack that silenced the room. For a moment no one moved. Then the blood came, bright against the pale rug, seeping fast. Nathan dropped to his knees. "Joe, hey, stay with me, please, hey." His voice cracked into sobs, his hands useless against the flood. Elise pressed her palms to the wound, whispering Jonah's name like a prayer unraveling. Mark stirred awake to the sound of screams, stumbled toward the firelight, and stopped cold. His sons, his wife. Blood, the world collapsing all at once, and above it all the house stood still, its wind chimes rattling in the storm. It had heard the feud grow. It had felt the walls shake. Now it had claimed its price. That night the Carpenter family broke beyond repair. By the time Sheriff Velma Pike's cruiser crunched into the Carpenter driveway, the house was already steeped in grief. The porch light flickered against the storm, and the wind chimes wouldn't stop ringing, like the air itself was screaming. Inside, Jonah was gone. His body lay still on the rug, eyes open toward a ceiling that had no answers. Blood had already dried into the fibers, dark and merciless. Elise knelt nearby, hands stained, whispering his name over and over, as though repetition might restart his heart. Nathan was on the floor beside him, rocking back and forth, his shirt soaked with his brother's blood. He wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. He just kept muttering, "It's my fault, it's my fault." Mark stood frozen, his face hollowed, gripping the back of his recliner for balance. The carving knife from Thanksgiving still lay on the counter, untouched but ominous. He looked like a man who had just realized he had outlived the family he thought he'd built. Sheriff Pike crouched beside Jonah, her lips pressed tight. She'd seen death before, but not like this, not in a family that was supposed to be whole. When she asked what happened, the stories tangled. Elise spoke first. It was an accident. He grabbed for the candlestick. It slipped. It wasn't supposed to. Her voice cracked, the words dissolving into sobs. Nathan's response was worse, silence. Then, after a long pause, a single sentence. "I picked it up. I shouldn't have. If I hadn't, he'd still." He broke off, choking on the end. Sheriff Pike studied him, the way his hands shook, the way he couldn't bring himself to say alive. She bagged the candlestick, measured distances, took photographs. On the coffee table, Jonah's camera still rested, the strap dangling. She scrolled to the last frame he'd captured. It wasn't of Elise or Nathan or even the fight. It was of a single candle on the mantel, its flame steady, holding against the dark. When she left the house, Pike knew the law would call it an accident. No intent, no charges, but the town wouldn't see it that way. And neither would the people trapped inside that house, because guilt doesn't wait for verdicts. It lives in the walls. By the next morning, the Carpenter tragedy wasn't just a secret carried by one family. It was Whitfield's property. The sheriff's official word was accident, but in a town of one stoplight and 3 churches, no one trusts silence. Gossip spread quicker than truth ever could. At the diner, someone whispered, the stepmother loved one twin. At the feed store, someone else swore, the other twin loved her back. By sundown, the story had turned into a legend, half fact, half hunger. Whitfield split itself into camps overnight. Some swore Elise was a predator who'd stolen 2 sons from their father. Others said Nathan was violent, jealous, and dangerous, that Jonah's blood was his burden to carry. A smaller few insisted the sheriff had botched it. that there was more than an accident in that house, and law had simply chosen the easier path. The Carpenter fence line became a battlefield of opinions. One morning, red spray paint screamed monster across the boards. Mark scrubbed it off before sunrise, his hands raw, but the paint bled back through like an accusation that refused to stay buried. At church, Pastor Greer preached on temptation and betrayal without naming names. Half the congregation stared at Elise, the other half at Nathan. Neither lifted their eyes. Mark retreated into his store, stacking screws and nails with mechanical precision, pretending not to hear customers whisper when he walked by. Elise stopped singing in the choir. She kept her head down at the grocery store, pushing her cart past stairs that cut sharper than blades. And Nathan became the boy people crossed the street to avoid. His friends didn't call. The quarry foreman said they didn't have hours for him. Every place that had once been home turned hostile. What had begun as a secret kiss in a quiet studio had grown into a feud that fed on whispers, pity, and rage. Whitfield wasn't just telling the story anymore, it was living it. Winter settled heavy on Whitfield. Snow dusted the Carpenter roof, but inside the house there was no peace, only silence that gnawed at the edges. Nathan couldn't sleep in his room anymore. He moved to the garage, setting up a cot beside the truck he and Jonah had rebuilt, the smell of motor oil and rust his only comfort. Every night he lay there staring at the ceiling beams, waiting for answers that never came. Then one morning he snapped. He rolled the truck into the yard, hood up, a for sale sign propped against the windshield. The neighbors slowed their cars, whispering. That truck wasn't just steel. It was the twins' story. Selling it was like selling half a soul. Elise found him tightening bolts, his jaw locked. "Please don't," she said softly. "That's all you have left of him." Nathan's hands stilled. He looked up at her with eyes hollowed by grief. "No," he said, "it's all I have left of me." She didn't understand. She thought he was angry. She didn't realize he was erasing every map that reminded him of Jonah, of betrayal, of the fracture that had split his world. That night, she knocked on the garage door. "Nathan, please talk to me." He opened it just enough to meet her eyes. His voice was low, ragged. Why him? Her brows furrowed. What? Why Jonah? His lips trembled, but the question landed like a blade. Why not me? Or was it always both of us? Did you take turns with your heart? Elise's chest tightened. She wanted to say it hadn't been a choice, that Jonah had seen her in a way that scared her, that Nathan's fire was too much and Jonah's stillness was too tempting. But the truth was ugly, and lies would only salt the wound. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Nathan's jaw clenched, his fists balled tight at his sides. "Sorry doesn't put the blood back." He closed the door gently, not slammed, not loud, but the soft click was worse. It was the sound of a bond snapping without a fight. The house absorbed his words, heavy as stone, and for the first time Elise realized Nathan's rage wasn't just grief, it was survival, and it would carry him far away from her. District Attorney Sloan sat with the file spread across his desk for 3 nights. Photos of the blood-stained hearth, forensic notes, angle of impact consistent with fall, not deliberate strike. Statements from Elise, Nathan, and Sheriff Pike. No intent, no charges, just a phrase heavy enough to crush a town. Tragic accident. The press release went out on a Tuesday because bad news always rides Tuesdays. By Wednesday, Whitfield was on fire. At the diner, someone slammed a mug down so hard coffee sloshed. Accident. You don't bleed out on a rug because of an accident. Somebody has to pay. At church, Pastor Greer said the law may have spoken, but God's judgment was still pending. Half the pews nodded. The other half stared at Nathan, who hadn't lifted his eyes in weeks. Signs appeared at the courthouse. Do better. He deserved more. Love isn't a defense. For Elise, the verdict brought no relief. She found letters slipped under her door, some spitting venom, others trembling with pity. One widow wrote, "Grief is a country with bad roads. Drive slow." A teenager scrawled, "You ruined everything." She folded both into a shoebox marked with Jonah's name, because penance had to live somewhere. For Nathan, the verdict felt like betrayal. The law had set him free, but guilt chained him tighter than bars ever could. He couldn't walk Main Street without feeling eyes on his back, whispers crawling over his shoulders. He turned down every offer to leave at first, but each day made it harder to breathe in a town that treated him like a walking crime scene. Mark said little. He fixed shelves that didn't need fixing, raked leaves already gathered, stacked nails in the store until his fingers ached. Silence was his shield, but silence doesn't bury grief, it feeds it. Whitfield wanted a villain. The law had given them none, so the town created one itself, splitting its judgment like kindling, half pointed at Nathan, half at Elise. Both lived in exile, even under their own roof. And through it all, the house at the edge of town groaned in the wind, carrying a story no verdict could erase. The days after the DA ruling hollowed the Carpenters out. Nathan stopped answering calls. His friends drifted away, unwilling to stand near the shadow that clung to him. Elise resigned from the studio under the polite phrase, "best for the students." Mark went about town like a man walking underwater, nodding but never really seeing. And then Nathan made his decision. He put the F-150, the truck he and Jonah had rebuilt bolt by bolt up for sale. A man from 2 counties over handed him cash and drove away. Nathan stood in the driveway, watching taillights shrink into the horizon, his jaw tight. The truck was gone, the past was gone, and Whitfield had nothing left to hold him. That night he asked for one thing, just dinner, one last time, for Jonah. Mark cooked steaks, the way Jonah liked them, pink at the center, edges charred. Elise made green beans with lemon, her hands trembling as she set them down. Nathan poured water for all 3, moving like a man performing a ritual. They ate mostly in silence, the clink of silverware, the soft crackle of the fireplace, a family pretending to still be one. When the plates were cleared, Nathan slid a small box across the table. Inside was Jonah's camera strap, leather worn from years pressed against his brother's collarbone. "Keep it," and Nathan said, looking at Elise. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried oceans. "He saw you. Maybe you can teach yourself how to see without breaking things." Elise's breath caught. Her hand hovered over the strap like it was burning. "Nathan, I don't." He stood, chair scraping back. "Let me go while I still think we can survive this by giving each other space." Mark rose and pulled his son into an embrace longer than men in Whitfield usually gave. Nathan let it happen, his face pressed into his father's shoulder, and for a moment he was a boy again, not the survivor of a feud. Then he was gone, bag in hand, boots crunching on gravel, truck engine fading into the night. Elise sat at the table, the camera strap clutched in her palm. Mark lowered himself slowly back into his chair, staring at the empty plate where Nathan had sat. The family that had once been 4 was now 2 and a ghost. The house groaned in the winter wind. It had seen its last supper, and it knew it would never hold laughter the same way again. Nathan left Whitfield under a sky so clear the stars looked like nails hammered into black wood. For weeks, the house felt emptier than ever, its walls echoing with footsteps that would never return. He began sending postcards, sparse words scratched in pencil from towns that sounded made up, Lost Springs, Medicine Bow, Truth or Consequences. He never said much, just the weather, the look of the sky, a highway that seemed endless. He never asked about Elise. He never asked about home. Mark folded each card carefully and kept them in Jonah's old shoebox, as if storing them there might keep both his boys together, at least in memory. Elise tried to disappear quietly. She rented a small apartment above the bakery, handed her house keys back to Mark, and walked Whitfield's streets with her eyes lowered. The dance studio was no longer hers, the church pew beside her no longer welcoming. She carried silence like luggage she couldn't set down, but one morning a package arrived, wrapped in shop towels. Inside was a battered Nikon camera and a note in Nathan's handwriting. Found this at a pawn shop in Cheyenne. Thought you might use it. Elise held it like contraband. Slowly, she began walking the town at dawn, taking photographs of things no one noticed. A thimble left on a windowsill, a nest abandoned under the eaves, the river at the bend behind the silo. She pinned them quietly on the library bulletin board, unsigned. People stopped, looked, whispered. One boy of 12 asked his mother, staring at a photo of the courthouse steps, "How can something be sad and beautiful at the same time?" His mother replied, "You just described most of life." Elise, shelving books nearby, had to steady her breathing. Mark survived by routine. Hardware store at 8, lunch at noon, shelves restocked until his back ached. He spoke less, listened more, and kept Jonah's last photograph, a single candle burning steady, framed behind the counter. Customers bought nails and left quickly, but their eyes always lingered on that flame. The Carpenter family didn't heal. Healing implies return. What they found instead was survival. Nathan on highways, Elise behind a lens, Mark behind his counter. Jonah in memory. The feud had ended in blood. The aftermath lived on in silence. The Carpenter house still stands on its low rise at the edge of Whitfield. The paint has faded. The porch boards creak. The wind chimes sing even when there is no wind. To strangers it looks like any other country home, but to the town it is a monument, a reminder of what love can break and what grief can never mend. If you kneel by the hearth you'll see it, a faint shadow in the stone, a stain that never scrubbed clean. Mark never tried too hard. He said some marks are meant to stay. In his store, above aisle 2, hangs Jonah's final photograph, a candle flame refusing to go out. People glance at it as they buy screws and hammers. Some look away quickly. Others linger, as though the picture knows their secrets too. Elise still walks Whitfield at dawn, camera slung to her shoulder. She captures what others miss. Quiet corners, unremarkable moments, the poetry of things that don't last. Her photos appear in the library from time to time, unsigned. Folks have stopped asking who takes them. They just stand and look, and maybe for a moment forgive. Nathan sends fewer postcards now. When he does, the words are short. Sky red at sunset. River froze solid. Still driving, he never mentions home. He doesn't need to. The silence between lines says enough, and the house, it remembers everything. The laughter of two boys who thought together was forever. The hush of a stepmother who mistook longing for rescue. The crash of a candlestick, the scream that split the night, the silence that followed. Whitfield still tells the story, the stepmother who loved one twin, the feud that spilled blood, the family that never healed. They tell it as a warning, sometimes as gossip, sometimes as prayer, but the truth, the house whispers, is simpler and harder all at once. Love, when mislaid, does not just bend, it breaks, and when it breaks inside a family, it doesn't shatter clean. The pieces lodge deep, sharp, and permanent. The wind chimes rattle in the night, carrying that lesson across the fields, and if you listen long enough, you might hear it too, see without breaking, love without stealing. Or the house will remember you the way it remembers them, by the silence left behind. This case reminds us, evil doesn't always come from outside. It can grow inside a family, a friendship, a quiet town. And once it begins, it never really leaves. Thank you for watching Murder Book 360, where every story is a shadow, and every shadow tells the truth. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because the next story may be closer than you think.